accept that Head Start program. And if we're going to do that, because people don't always agree, then what we need to have is that third-party arbitrator.
Oh, thank you. We have limited time. Does anyone have any additional to add? Yes. Please turn your mic on. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Hello. I thank you for allowing me to address this. My name is Tammy Stanley, and I'm Central Kentucky Head Start Director. As a former Head Start parent many years ago, Head Start works. I promise. I'm here as the Head Start Director for Central Kentucky, and I can tell you that Head Start works, especially when you work closely with your school systems to ensure that the federal dollars are spent first, that the children with the most need come to us so we can help prepare them for their education journey. The school systems will get these children. We want to work with them together to make sure that every child is ready as possible for the education journey that's ahead of them. In our district, in our area, in our 6 counties, we work closely with most of our school systems, not all. We want to work with all of them. When we work together, it's phenomenal. It helps everybody. It helps the family become taxpayers. It helps them to finish school. It helps employ many people in our areas. So I'm just here to encourage everyone to start back over and allow Head Start to be at the table and us work together to strengthen this full utilization so it meets the needs of all of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. And would you please introduce yourself for the record?
Oh, me?
Oh, she did.
Yes.
I didn't hear.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you. Go ahead. And we're very limited, so if you would please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Brian Conover. I also represent Central Kentucky Community Action. The only two quabbles or quarrels we would have with Senator Wise's testimony would be that the Attorney General does not have to be the third party, does not have to be the independent arbitrator of these issues or of these concerns. We do want an independent voice in the room because, as you all might expect, we want also to have great collaboration, but that doesn't always exist. Blended programs are where our Head Start programs are in the public schools already a part of the Department of Education in formal or informal ways, and that is not the case for your community action agencies. The last thing I want to say is we cannot guarantee this bill would not harm federal dollars flowing into the state. If full utilization is disagreed upon, if our Head Start programs are not filling our slots, our funding levels will decrease, and that will be passed on to the state, to the Commonwealth for those preschool slots. So there's no way you can guarantee at this point that a consequence of this bill would not be less federal money covering preschool opportunities for our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate it. If the sponsor would please return to the table. I don't see any questions before us, Senator, so we will call the roll. If you're out, yes. Representative Banta.
Senator, are the districts okay with this?
We have not had any opposition that I've heard from this bill. The only thing is just from the Community Action Council of requesting that third party, and what I was told was it would be the Kentucky Attorney General would be that third party. But we also with this bill have the Commissioner of Education as one to go forth, and I have faith that our Commissioner of Education, if there's any disagreements that would ever happen, that he would be the one to be able to supervise and work on those negotiations. Thank you.
Mariah, please call the roll.
Representative Baker?
Yes.
Representative Banta?
Yes.
Representative Bojanowski?
Yes.
Representative Decker?
Yes.
Representative Donahue?
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Dossett?
Yes.
Representative Hart?
Yes.
Representative Lewis?
Yes.
Representative Massey?
Yes.
Representative McCool?
Yes.
Representative McCoy?
Yes.
Representative Miller? Representative Gibbons-Prunty?
Yes.
Representative Rayburn? Representative Riley?
Yes.
Representative Scott?
No.
Representative Timoney?
Yes.
Representative Tipton?
Yes.
Representative Weber?
Yes.
Representative Wilner?
Pass.
Chair Huff?
I'm going to be a yes today, but I want to go back. I've had some people from Bell Whitley organization that have some concerns, so I want to go back and so to look at that, but I'll be a yes today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you. Senate Bill 60 passes with expression of opinion that the same should pass. Thank you. I think you will remain in that chair, if you will, and we will head right into Senate Bill 138, an act relating to student instruction. Representative Senator Wise, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 138 is also entitled the Teaching American Principles Act. And the purpose of this bill is to preserve the alignment of middle and high school standards with American principles of equality, freedom, and personal agency. I know we're limited on time, and this bill has been one that's been discussed thoroughly on the Senate Education Committee, the Senate floor, as well as Kentucky Tonight, as well as multiple interviews that have taken place with this bill. But this bill has also had changes that was made from the original bill, changes that were made to accommodate others and to accommodate educators, accommodate parents' needs, accommodate students, and to accommodate the Commonwealth of Kentucky. This bill basically deals with instructional alignment with standards. The instruction shall align with state social studies standards and be consistent with the historical American principles that I mentioned. This does not preclude instruction about controversial aspects of history or oppression of any ethnic group by another. The social studies standards we have in place are through 5th grade. That gets into documents such as the Mayflower Compact, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. We do not have those same social studies standards in line for middle and high school. This simply brings those standards into alignment, so when we have educators talking about issues in the classroom, we were able to go directly to those standards for middle and high school. In this document, we also put forth core American documents to be used as primary sources. Those primary sources were chosen by looking at the 50 core American documents that were put forth by the Ashbrook Center. The Ashbrook Center is a think tank organization which is nonpartisan. I did not consult with the Ashbrook Center. They did not contact me, but they have some of the best core American documents that can be and have been used at all different levels of the educational systems. By choosing those 24 American documents and putting those into place, it allows educators to have sources to go to. Now, with that, there is nothing in the bill that tells an educator what you cannot teach. It does not discipline a teacher. It does not tell a student what you can and cannot say. It simply looks at the foundations of our country and allows educators to go back and use those documents. We are facing a civics crisis in not just the Commonwealth of Kentucky, but the United States. I do not blame teachers for that, but I look at things that get cut many times from our standards and many times get cut in education, and it is civics education. Less than 25% of U.S. students graduating high school can pass a U.S. civics or citizenship examination. This bill simply says, looking at those foundational documents, let's be able to have discussions, but go back to times in history, good and bad. There's good things in our U.S. history, but there's also some atrocities that took place. I don't think many people on here would say Plessy versus Ferguson as a court case was a good day for the United States of America. That court document is used as one of those sources. We could look at issues such as Marbury versus Madison. We can look at issues that relate to different things in our history. But this bill does not tell an educator, you must talk about this, you cannot talk about that. Those core American documents, once again, would extend those existing elementary standards to middle and high school. We have those standards in place. And it says right here specifically, Kentucky Academic Standards for Social Studies. On page 17, civic virtues and democratic principles. Understanding democratic principles such as equality, freedom, liberty, and respect for individual rights, and how they apply to both official institutions and informal interactions among citizens is a fundamental concept of being a citizen in a democratic republic. Learning civic virtues and democratic principles require obtaining factual knowledge of written provisions found in important texts, such as the founding documents of the United States. If this is good for elementary school, This should be good for middle and high school students as well, for them to be able to have the same documents and teachers to use these same documents in terms of the core primary sources. It also will, without impacting the existing schedule for approving state standards, KDE shall incorporate a specific list of these 24 core original documents, speeches, and U.S. Supreme Court decisions into those grade level appropriate social studies standards. Lastly, employee guidance. A section of this bill says that instruction on controversial current events shall be age appropriate, non-discriminatory, and respectful for the differing perspectives of students. If there's an assignment that's given, if there's extra credit that's given, if there's a field trip that's given, and a parent objects to that for their minor, then they should have the right to object to that. If there's a certain rally that a teacher is saying, here's what a student will be going to, but a parent objects to that, they have the right to do so. Many of these things are already put into place, and the language that you have in that bill comes from the Kentucky School Board Association as well as EPSB, the Educational Professional Standards Board. A teacher shall not require or incentivize a student to advocate a cause or political candidate with which the student or the parent or the guardian or the minor student does not agree with. And lastly, on training, an employee shall not be required to engage in professional development or training that coerces the employees to stereotype a group or people. Instead of telling a teacher what they can't do, this simply aligns north and south of saying, here are documents to put into place. Here are things that we want to see in terms of getting back to our foundation, our principles of our country. Madam Chair, I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have on Senate Bill 138 at this time.
Thank you. We do have a few questions. Representative Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator, many people may in here know that I was a former U.S. history teacher, both at the collegiate and the high school level. And during those times, I taught about the fugitive slave law, about the evils of slavery, that the two greatest stains in American history are slavery and the taking of lands from indigenous people. I taught about the Freedmen's Bureau, Jim Crow laws, as you mentioned, Plessy versus Ferguson, the segregation during World War II of black soldiers, the heroism of the Tuskegee Airmen, the extremely sad and depressing event that involved Emmett Till, a young Chicago man, a young boy from Chicago, a young man from Chicago, who visited his family in Mississippi, and because he had the audacity to speak to a white woman, was killed and his body was maimed. His mom left his casket open because she wanted to see what they had done to him. I showed this to my classes in the Ken Burns series of the Civil Rights Movement. I taught about Brown versus Board of Education. Obviously, Martin Luther King was a big part of what we taught. I always show my students his I Have a Dream speech, which I think is the greatest speech in American history. I also taught about the letters from the Birmingham jail that Dr. King wrote to white Southern clergymen, admonishing them for their lack of involvement in the Civil Rights Movement, and multiple other issues that are way too numerous to mention. I think you understand why I need to ask this question. Is there anything in this bill that would have precluded me, teachers today and teachers in the future, from teaching those events and similar events to that?
Representative Riley, thank you for the question. I refer to page 2, line 4, section 2. Nothing in subsection 1 of this section shall be construed to restrict a public school or public charter school from providing instruction or using instructional materials that include what's listed there: the history of an ethnic group, discussion of controversial aspects of history, the instructional materials on the historical oppression of a particular group of people. There is nothing in that bill that would have had you not be able to teach those subject matters that you talked about. There's nothing for current teachers or future teachers that gets into that with this bill. Actually, with everything you mentioned there, many of those things are mentioned in here with those documents that you mentioned, some of those speeches, some of those court cases. This also doesn't tell a teacher this is what you're limited to use still in the classroom. If you want to go back and find other speeches, other documents, compare, that's great. We encourage that. We encourage that in the classroom. So with this is just saying here are 24 documents. We've got it at the elementary level. Let's expand it and to align it at middle school and high school. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Bojanowski.
Yes. Thank you very much. This bill lists 24 fundamental American documents and speeches. All but 5 of them came from the Ashbrook University book, 50 Core American Documents, which not having paid attention very well in high school during history class, I referred to learn a little bit about some of the documents in the list. And I'd like to ask specifically about the inclusion of A Time for Choosing by Ronald Reagan, because as I read the introduction to the section in the Ashbrook book, the Reagan speech is matched with Lyndon Johnson's Great Society speech as, and I quote from the book, they presented 2 broad views of America's purpose and future that continue to shape and influence political debate today. Could you explain why the Reagan speech was included in this list of documents and the Johnson speech was not?
There are also, Representative Bojanowski, thank you for the question. The Ashbrook Center also put out core documents on slavery and its consequences, many documents that I also included in from here. Religion and American History and Politics, 25 core American documents. There's another on gender issues and core documents. With that one specifically of looking at the Reagan speech, I think even the Reagan speech would be a timely discussion to have in a class today. Words that Ronald Reagan used in that speech when he was not yet a U.S. president, it was a speech on the campaign trail with Barry Goldwater. But with that speech, it said that there's no left and there's no left, there's no right, there's an up and there's a down. We also look at A Time for Choosing in terms of democratic principles, democracy. Look at the world events that are occurring right now. What better time also to be able to use that speech and to utilize that into middle and high school education. Somebody also may look at this and they say, well, gosh, there's been, Senator Wise, all kinds of great political speeches over the years. Yes, Reagan's speech goes to that one right there, probably one of the top 5 oratory speeches that possibly launched a political campaign for someone later in life. You could also take this and look at other political speeches, maybe in the last 20 years, the last 15 years, and compare how a speech such as that could launch somebody, how the impact of that could have also changed media at that time, what we live in the world today. I think there's a lot of things. So with that, and choosing the others, this is just what I came up with. It was in consultation of looking at, I probably could have had unlimited sources. That's not to say we can't go back and maybe revise and look at that also sometime, but this also doesn't tell a teacher that they can't use that same speech by Lyndon Johnson to compare it with Reagan, with that speech such as A Time for Choosing.
If I may comment briefly?
Very briefly.
Very briefly. It's my understanding that Reagan's speech was in response to Johnson's speech. And in the Great Society speech, Johnson called for Americans to give every citizen the full equality which God enjoins and the law requires, whatever his belief, race, or color of the skin, and to join the battle to give every citizen an escape from the crushing weight of poverty. I guess I wonder, there's always a bias in selecting documents, and I wonder if core American principles do not include eliminating poverty and equity for all.
Representative Wilner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Wise. I appreciate that you've spoken with a lot of stakeholders and you've made a lot of changes to this bill, and it's very different from the original version, and I really do appreciate that and recognize it. I guess I have some questions about, and I think you may have already answered this, but what can be taught and what can be said about these documents, I believe, is up to the classroom teacher. And just specifically, for example, Rep. Bojanowski referred to the Reagan speech, which has some pretty clear racist undertones in there, and even some racist overtones where he talks about American tax dollars being used to buy additional wives for Kenyan government officials. And in this bill, would those kinds of conversations be allowed to take place in the classroom? And in that same vein, the Declaration of Independence, of course, was written when some human beings literally owned other human beings, and the Declaration of Independence did not apply to those enslaved people who were owned. It did not apply to women. There were a lot of people it did not apply to, and so would those conversations still be able to continue in presenting the context for these documents?
Representative Wilner, thank you for the question. I think you also just answered it as well. That would still be able to be done in the classroom by bringing out a document such as that to show students, look at how far our country has came. But let's also look at the time of that was in historical context and be able to look at the discussions and have those very critical thinking conversations. This bill is not getting into telling a teacher, this is what it is and this is the only thing that can be construed from that speech. No. Look at it from all different angles. That's what the purpose of this will be able to do. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Representative Donahue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. It's important. Senator, the resounding thing I kept hearing from you is that this bill doesn't do anything to stop teachers from teaching. And I guess my question is, why are we so quick to dictate to teachers what to teach? And before you answer that question, is when I was in school, we talk about history and stuff. A lot of times we'd have something happen in current events, and we would go back in time and take a look at it as a teacher and how things historically related to what was going on. So it changed constantly. But the one thing, a resounding theme about this bill is why are we so quick to dictate to teachers what they need to teach? Let's let them teach. Your thoughts?
Representative, I think we also need to allow our children how to learn and actually sometimes not what to learn. And I think we have great educators in the system that can work with students and be able to bring out those types of conversations in the classroom. I will say parent engagement right now is at a very, very high point in our country. And I think because of what we went through over the past 2 years, we have seen parents very engaged with student assignments, parents very engaged in student homework, and we look at that, and that should have always been the case. Parents should always be engaged. I know I am. I think most of us up here on the committee are, but we know that every household is not the same. But we also want those teachers to be able to have those conversations. This bill is not telling a teacher, you cannot talk about that in the classroom. But I would be lying if I weren't to say that parents have conversed with me and probably many of you about things that have happened and things that they've seen in terms of some homework assignments that they've been somewhat uncomfortable with. That's why we put in there the age-appropriate language in this bill to make sure that if some things are being assigned, that it is on an age-appropriate level.
Madam Chair, may I follow up quickly? Every day and every moment, every day is a teaching moment. And my parents, when I was a kid growing up, they were able to resolve. I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't have engaged parents when I was a kid growing up. And that's a long time ago. But my point to you is this, is that sometimes we're quick to mandate to folks what they do to teach instead of let parents do what they need to do and let teachers teach what they need to teach. And we've always had the ability, when it talks about field trips and stuff, not to go somewhere like that. My parents were always engaged, and most parents that I speak with, and I'm sure you do as well too, are engaged and they make the right decisions for their children. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Senator, of course, you and I have already debated this bill thoroughly, and I have a very different opinion about the core documents, especially the erasure of women in those core documents. I feel like we could do much better with that. I have two questions that we didn't get to discuss. One is, what is good citizenship, and who determines what that is?
I mean, in terms of defining what is good citizenship, I think there could be multiple hypotheticals and multiple answers I could give to that. But I think good citizenship can be forth in the home of parents educating their children, having conversations about what it is to be a good citizen of the Commonwealth and a good citizen of the country. At the same time, I think we also entrust our teachers that when they have our children, that they also, when they leave a school building, would have the foundations of what also is being a good citizen. I think many things in these core documents are things that you can go back to and look at different points of history to look at those principles, once again, of equality, freedom, and personal agency. To tell a child, this is what you can become. These are some things here of what our country is based upon, and some things that in time of where we are and where we're going, I think will be wonderful conversations about being a good, productive citizen.
Thank you. And then my second question is, in Section 1E, you say that defining racial disparities solely on the legacy of this institution, the institution of slavery, is destructive to the unification of our nation. How is it destructive to the unification of our nation?
Representative, if you can, please direct me real quickly
Sure.
at the page and the section.
Page 1, Section 1, number 1E.
Thank you very much. Just making sure. Basically, what you see here is what we took with the basic principles of a group entitled 1776 Unites. If many of you all came in terms of the education meeting we had at the interim, and you heard from Ian Rowe, of looking at these specific principles here of what we should value and what should be a guiding principles. That's where we came up with this in terms of coming up with how someone should be treated. Basically, everyone should be responsible for him or herself in life. Everyone should have opportunities to better themselves. Those are the foundations of the principles we wanted to use in this language.
And I was speaking specifically, Senator, to defining racial disparities solely on the institutional of slavery is destructive to the unification of our nation. I'm trying to understand how that is destructive to the unification of our nation, because when we talk about slavery, we're talking about when Black people were brought to this country, and that's when those racial disparities began. So I don't understand how that's destructive to point to slavery as part of the creation of these racial disparities.
Representative Scott, sorry, my apologies on the context of your question, but also in terms of where we are as a country. Yes, we need to go back and we need to look at events of that, such as slavery, as the dark times of our history, but also in the time we're living in, of also telling a child that you can't do well in life because of events that happened previously. Look at where we are today and be able to say, you can better yourself. There's been things that have transitioned over the years. We're not at the same point of that time in history to be able to get to where hopefully that child is and where they're going in life, and not to have that as a crux or anything such as that.
You said, but it says it's destructive to the unification of our nation. How is it destructive to the unification of our nation?
Well, once again, if we're trying to become, and this is a bill as an attempt to unify all of us, but if we go back and we always say that everything is based off of this point in history, is that unifying us? That was a bad point. So we want to make sure that where we are today, we don't just always tell a student, you can't achieve in life because of a certain point in American history. That's the destruction. We don't want that in terms of, I don't want that as the United States. I want to learn from that. I want to teach my children also about a point in history. And I want, hopefully, our educators will be doing the same thing.
I just want you to know, Senator, Section E actually
Representative
isn't saying...
Scott, please go through the chair.
Oh, oh, okay.
Do you have another question?
I didn't. I was just going to say it doesn't sound like what you're saying is reflected in this section. It sounds slightly different. That's all that I was saying. It just sounds different.
Thank you. We do have some that have signed up to speak in opposition of this measure. I also want to share with the group, it's already, the hour's getting late, so we need to look at each group and pick one person to come to the table. Also, I'm going to take the first four that have signed up on each piece of legislation. So first we'll have the ACLU, Kate Miller, if you will come to the table. And all that are with you. And please, you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll be very brief.
Please introduce yourself for the record,
Yes,
each one of you.
ma'am. My name's Kate Miller with the ACLU of Kentucky. Just introduce yourselves quickly.
Hello, my name is Brennan Everwine. I am a junior at DuPont Manual High School in Jefferson County.
Hi, my name is Bree Woods. I'm a junior at DuPont Manual High School.
And as the oldest person at this table, I'm going to be even more brief than I'd already planned to be given the time limits that we're under. So Chairwoman Huff, members of the committee, thank you so much for allowing us to testify today. My name's Kate Miller. I'm with the ACLU of Kentucky, and as you all may know, the ACLU has a long history of defending free speech rights under the Constitution and under the First Amendment in particular. And that's something I just wanted to flag. There's going to be a lot of voices up here, but I wanted to touch on two things. First, that Senate Bill 138, while it has been amended substantively, and we're deeply appreciative of the sponsor for doing that, it does not go far enough. And Senate Bill 138 first serves as a way to censor speech. It is a government censorship bill. There's a long history of these types of bills, and we should remember that First Amendment rights do not stop for teachers or students at the schoolhouse gate. So what I want to first focus on is that even if the language says, well, this is not intended to restrict the speech of students and teachers, there's additional language, as Representative Scott already pointed out, that we think will absolutely chill integral discussions in the classroom. So first, I want to speak to you as a First Amendment advocate and state that opposition. Secondly, and very briefly, I want to speak to you as a, for the most part, fellow white person. I think every member of this committee, aside from Representative Scott, identifies as white. And as a white person who often gets discussions on race wrong, right? We're not alone in this. Sometimes we say the wrong thing. And I want to say that in response to that, we have a responsibility to rectify those wrongs, and this bill doesn't help us get there. This bill will limit this generation and future generations opportunities to repair the harm that we have caused. And I know conversations on race aren't easy. I know I felt ashamed and embarrassed as well for things that I've said, and more importantly, things that my ancestors have done, but we have a responsibility to face those things. And so I had a much more eloquent set of remarks prepared that I think would have persuaded you all, but I just wanted to touch on those things very briefly, and I'm going to hand it over to these much more important voices.
As I said, my name is Brennan Everwine. I first would like to say I really thank Senator Wise for modifying this bill and reaching out to as many people as he can. I know he talked to me, and I do empathize with his position, but I still believe that this bill will create a chilling effect in classrooms and will force teachers to dilute their lessons in fear of retaliation from parents who could misconstrue that at any age, something could be age inappropriate. Any lesson that may make them uncomfortable could be misconstrued as age inappropriate. And to be honest, history is uncomfortable. This year has been especially a challenge as a student in AP United States history. We've looked at some really difficult things. Recently, just yesterday, I did a lesson on World War II, specifically the United States' Pacific Island hopping campaign, in which we looked at pictures from the Library of Congress. One of these pictures was of two American soldiers who took a Japanese body that they had murdered, and they were boiling the skin off that Japanese body to use their skull as a decoration on their tanks and on signs. And there are multiple pictures of this in the Library of Congress. These were pictures taken. This is documented, among other things. We also learned about the Zoot Suit riots in Los Angeles, the Detroit housing riots. These were all during World War II. And it's contrary to what I've learned about how World War II was a time of unification of Camelot in the United States, when it wasn't. And it is important, it is imperative that we learn about this, because we are not free of atrocities. And I'm not saying that the Japanese were not free from atrocities or anybody else was not free of atrocities, but we need to learn about this. We need to know about this so that we can grow and so we can remember, because memory is how we get better. And I really want to look back so I can look forward. And I believe that this bill, although I do like the civics part, I believe in the civics part, I believe it does not accurately depict American history. It is missing women's voices, it is missing black women's voices, it is missing a lot of voices. And I really just believe that we need to look backwards, and we need to take a long, hard look backwards and do it as freely and openly as possible so that we can create a better world. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bree Woods, and I urge you to vote no on Senate Bill 138. My fellow classmates and I heard that the bill's goal is to view American history with a positive outlook. What we really heard is that legislators want teachers to lie about our history. America was built on the ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but when we analyze our history, we see that these positive ideals are twofold. Within the goal of life, we see institutions like the government and army taking lives and imperializing Hawaii on the basis of racism and prejudice. Within the goal of liberty, we see these same institutions enslaving African Americans and keeping natives from gaining citizenship to the land they lived on before us. And lastly, within the pursuit of happiness, we see institutions barring citizens of color from access to education, healthcare, and housing equal to their white counterparts. If we as students don't come to terms with these undeniable facts, the Commonwealth will continue to face the problems we face today and have faced in the past. One of the most important lessons I've been taught in the social studies classes I've taken throughout my education is the importance of learning and coming to terms with our history. Only then can we truly work to create a more equitable future. Only then can my generation cultivate the self-efficacy and call to fulfill the American ideals this bill claims to promote. Members of the committee, I urge you to vote no on Senate Bill 138 and allow us what we deserve: unaltered, uncensored, and unsanitized United States history. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us today and speaking so eloquently on your position. Next, we have the Kentucky Academy of Science.
Good morning. I'm Rob Weber with the Kentucky Academy of Science. I serve as the Communications and Policy Director, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm here today on behalf of the Academy's Education and Advocacy Committee. The committee members have concerns that Senate Bill 138, their concerns arise from their appreciation for academic freedom and for the process that we have in Kentucky to develop academic standards. There is concern about the top-down approach to setting academic standards found in Senate Bill 138, and about the fact that these changes would take place outside the normal standards review process. This is not a new issue for our group. 100 years ago, the Kentucky Academy of Science members opposed a proposal in the General Assembly to prohibit the teaching of evolution in schools. So the top-down approach was seen as a slippery slope then, as it is now. Now, I understand changes have been made to Senate Bill 138 since it was originally introduced. The wording in the portion of the bill that listed the 24 speeches and documents to be taught in schools was changed so that instead of saying the items would become part of school curriculum, that they would instead become part of the state's academic standards. But even with this change, it's still apparent that local decision-making that we value when it comes to determining what's taught in classrooms would be minimized. At their best, academic standards outline the concepts we want students to learn so that decisions can then be made locally where people best know their students, their schools, and their issues on how they will achieve those. Kentucky has an academic standards review process that fosters analysis, deliberation, and input from educators, experts, and citizens, and that, we believe, is the most appropriate forum for considering changes to the academic standards to which schools must align their curriculums. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Donnie Wilkerson. He may be in another room. We'll go ahead with the Justice League of Louisville. If you would send one or two of you to the table, please. I remind you that we have a very few minutes, over 3. We're running over the time set.
Hello, I'm Chris Rasheed with Justice League LOU, and I'd like to ask These youth leaders have spent hours preparing for this moment, and they've been up since 5 in the morning. They've been working and coming up to Frankfurt since January, and I would ask that you would please allow them to speak today.
Well, don't think there's any way we can accommodate all of them. Maybe if you would just be silent and have a couple more come up and just speak. We're really short on time. I appreciate your opportunity. Did you speak to this bill in the Senate?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, Madam Chair.
Please proceed.
Hello, I'm Chris Rasheed. I am a coordinating director of Justice League LOU and a teacher at W.E.B. Du Bois Academy.
Hello, my name is Jayus Rasheed. I am with Justice League LOU and Mighty Shades of Ebony, and I go to Barrett Traditional Middle.
Hi, my name is Joseph Page, and I'm the creative director of Justice League LOU. I'm also the co-writer and actor in The Threads of Our History, where we intertwine with Louisville's Actors Theater.
So I would like to just start off by saying that this SB138 is tantamount to a Trojan horse with an embedded poison pill. Elementary school kids don't need to know all of the more graphic elements of history that middle school children developmentally and high school developmentally can go deeper into. And so it's a handcuffing, if you will. I'd like to say, what builds a citizen? Well, at Bloom's taxonomy, the lowest level of learning is knowledge. And I believe the senator or the gentleman proposing this bill said he wanted to teach students how to learn. That is not the way to teach. The highest level of Bloom's taxonomy is creativity. Children need to explore education and to experience education, and they determine how they learn. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to these edutainers. Jayus?
I'm going to give you an example. So I was in class, and I had an incident with these students, and they were talking about how they were mocking do-rags, and they were saying my hair was dreaded up. So we had a peer remediation, and I explained to them that what they said was racist, and it went against the Crown Act. And I was them, and they were understandable, and I was saying that I was explaining about cultural appropriation and I was giving them knowledge, but then I was ganged up on by some of the peer remediators in the room. They were talking to me, they were explaining what they were, and peer remediation, they're not supposed to give their opinion. We need to be learning about cultural appropriation. We need to be learning about slavery so we cannot repeat the past. We are doomed to repeat the past if we do not learn it.
Like I said, I'm Joseph Page, creator director of Justice League LOU, and I'm here today to speak out against Senate Bill 138. SB 138 is targeting our First Amendment right, which is the law that prohibits any law limiting freedom with respect to a religion, expression, peaceful assembly, or the right of citizens to petition the government. By threatening student advocacy groups and attacking the LGBTQ communities, by this bill being made, this also not only attacks Justice League LOU, but it also attacks other student advocacy based nonprofit organizations like, for example, Urban Ed, the Education Trust, Digital Promise, Girls Who Code, and many more. I want to learn where injustice first began so that I can break the cycle of injustice that has been destroying and affecting me and all of those who are around me.
Like this bill.
Okay, and my name is Orrin Hatchett, and I am also an edutainer representing Justice League LOU, and I would like to talk to you and oppose SB 138. And I can just say from the student's perspective, like I know we have all these representatives and coming and speaking for us, but from a student's perspective, I'd like to say that student advocacy is necessary because in these classrooms, we know that teachers have always had, the freedom to talk about these more gruesome topics like Emmett Till, Plessy v. Ferguson, but we also know that they've also had the freedom to talk about these nicer topics like what the Civil War was really fought about. But student advocacy is necessary because previously Justice League LOU came here for a committee, and we were in the rotunda and we were speaking out against HB 14 and 18, and those were also two other bills that would limit us to what we would learn in the classroom. I feel like this SB 138 is an extension of those because student advocacy, basically, this bill would just, it does not necessarily ban teachers, but it discourages them and it tells them, you know, it leads them towards what they can teach in class. And my teacher over there, Mr. Rasheed, Chris Rasheed, in class, he teaches us about a book called A Paragon, where we learn about more gruesome topics in his class. So we learn about Plessy v. Ferguson, we learn about redlining, and we learn about systematic racism. But SB 138 doesn't necessarily ban him from talking about these things, but it makes teachers like that feel threatened, and it makes them feel like they have to lean towards teaching these nicer topics because of who it will make uncomfortable. But in a sense, being uncomfortable with the knowledge you learn is better than going oblivious and having bliss ignorance.
I'm speaking from my bad. My name is D'Artagnan Hill. I'm in 7th grade at W.E.B. Du Bois Academy. I'm with Justice League LOU and Mighty Shades of Ebony. I'm speaking from personal experience. Having Mr. Rasheed's class and having somebody who can teach me about my culture and what actually happened rather than just, oh, you came from slavery and you were just picking cotton all the time. Rather than learning about true civilizations like the Kingdom of Kush and other great civilizations. Not being able to learn about that would give students, it would make students feel, for me, it would make me feel more uncomfortable because we're not learning about where people like me came from. And
we need to revise this, and I urge you guys to vote no. I'm learning about the Industrial Revolution right now. Although that is very important, I should be learning about more stuff. I should be learning about my culture. I should be learning about details. I need to be learning about going into details about slavery. So many of my peers and students don't feel like we're learning stuff that we need to be learning. We need to be learning more. That's what I'm trying to say.
Thank you very much for joining us today and giving your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Did Donnie Wilkerson? Oh, okay, great. You have about 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Huff and committee members. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Donnie Wilkerson. I'm a teacher down in Jamestown, Kentucky. A vote for this bill is a vote against the very American principles it purports to endorse. A vote for this bill is a vote for systemic racism, the very concept its proponents pretend does not exist. A vote for this bill sends a chilling message to educators across this great commonwealth. That message, be careful what you say. The thought police are watching. Yes, the original horrible bill was improved by the committee substitute. Thank you for that, Senator Wise. Now it's just a very bad bill. And like the unnecessary transphobic bills emerging from this session, is legislation in search of a problem. This law would be an affront to the Bill of Rights and should enrage all who cherish academic freedom. Most of the documents mentioned in Senate Bill 138 are great primary sources already in use in our classroom. But beyond that, who decides what is relevant or objective, or for that matter, controversial? Will Emmett Till, Fannie Lou Hamer, the Rosewood Massacre, or Elie Wiesel now be considered irrelevant or too mature for my students? Who decides what's disrespectful to differing perspectives? Must I remove time-honored scholarly works from my classroom shelves because they're written outside the range of knowledge of my students? Must I include diatribes from Holocaust deniers and those who would diminish the horrors of slavery? These differing perspectives are certainly prevalent. The effect of this unnecessary legislation will be to ban more and more books and limit more and more classroom discussions. This is a great country, but we must acknowledge that systemic racism is real and part of our history, and if it makes somebody a little uncomfortable occasionally, then so be it. If the goal of this bill is for students to experience free thought in the almost non-existent manner of their counterparts in Beijing, Moscow, and Pyongyang, then I suppose it will have the intended outcome. If this bill becomes law, most teachers will approach any controversial subject with heightened scrutiny and restraint. District and school leaders will err on the side of caution and will consequently limit severely what teachers can say or do in the classroom. I may be forced to reprise the role of Kentuckian John Thomas Scopes from over 100 years ago in Dayton, Tennessee. My students might just get to see the judicial branch working in real life. Legislation to restrict free speech and academic freedom should not be tolerated, and we must not allow ourselves to buy into the lesser of two evils approach. As Dr. King so aptly put in 1964, this is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. The Constitution's First Amendment guarantees no law abridging the freedom of speech shall be made, and its 14th further ensures that no state shall make any law which shall abridge that right. We must all stand firmly with the Constitution and against this unconstitutional legislation. Thank you very much for your indulgence.
Thank you. Seeing no further, we have a motion on the bill by Representative Baker, a second.
You have more people that signed up.
You're
It's a very
correct, and
important bill.
it is, and we have taken as much as we can from the audience.
Ma'am, this is an important bill. I cannot believe that you're going to shut down commentary.
Well, we have no other alternative. We're pressed on time. Gentlemen, make your exit, please.
I'll be quiet.
No, make your exit, please. Mariah, please call the roll.
Representative Baker?
Yes.
Representative Banta?
Yes.
Representative Bojanowski?
No.
Representative Decker?
Yes.
Representative Donahue?
No, ma'am.
Representative Dossett?
Madam Chair, I'd like to explain my vote, please.
Briefly, please.
Very briefly. I'm going to vote in support of this. And having a 10-year-old at my house who has probably been blessed, I know she's been blessed because she has accompanied me here many times, things that I have taught her about many of these, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, things that I have brought into her mind on this, to let her know that equality does exist in this nation. Maybe in some instances we could do better, but that we have learned from our past, that she has a chance of a very good life, and also to let her know that even though she has a minority ancestry in her blood, being Asian American, she also is fortunate to have a great-grandmother who is Japanese and come to this country and tells us numerous times at 93 years old how much she loves this country, how much she appreciates being here. And I think if each of us would go and talk to those who have immigrated, they would tell us that they would rather be living here in the United States rather than living in the countries where they came here from. Thank you. And I am a yes.
Representative Hart?
Yes.
Representative Lewis?
Yes.
Representative Massey?
Yes.
Representative McCool?
Yes.
Representative McCoy?
Yes.
Representative Miller? Representative Gibbons-Prunty?
Yes.
Representative Rayburn? Representative Riley? Representative Scott?
Chairwoman, I'd like to explain my vote briefly.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm voting no. I can't abide by this bill, the erasure in it, the unnecessary attempt at classroom censorship. We were moving along in a direction in the conversation that made it clear to me that the bill sponsor really is not interested in hearing from those of us who are different from the sponsor. And I just can't vote for something that takes away the voice of so many people that I represent back home in District 41, so I'm a no.
Representative Timoney?
Explain my vote.
Proceed.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I'm a no today, but this bill, whenever this topic was broached during the interim, this bill is a whole lot better than anything we've seen so far. My concern comes down to the fact that we have a process for determining our instructional standards, and I don't think that we should abandon that process when topics come along. I do think that the bill is well thought out, and as a former social studies teacher, I use this session today as almost an informal professional development. If I was going to create curriculum, what would that look like? Because I taught social studies and I taught civics. And, you know, I'm hearing a lot of the downside to it. But I don't necessarily, if I was crafting my instruction, I don't necessarily see those things. I would use these topics as guide points to signify the importance in American history and the direction that we need to be going. But I would also include things like, you know, the FDR speech is included in there. And I think it's important that FDR introduced Executive Order 9066, which dealt with Japanese internment. And that was one of the most unspoken about catastrophes, in my opinion, during World War II. And as I taught that to my students, that would always inherently bring about questions about, well, if that happened on the West Coast, why didn't it happen on the East Coast? So we were able to talk about different things that kind of came out of that. So I don't necessarily see this bill as limiting as a lot of people are saying today, but I do believe that we need to stick to our process when we're choosing curriculum. I think that this is definitely better than the alternatives, but with that being said, I am a no today.
Representative Tipton?
Yes.
Representative Weber?
Yes.
Representative Wilner?
Briefly explain my vote.
Briefly, please.
Thank you. I have quite a lot to say, but I am going to limit to just a very brief comment. I am a no today, and I want to thank the students, especially who spoke today. You are a testimony to the quality of education you're getting in your public schools. You're a credit to your teachers. You're a credit to this Commonwealth. And student advocacy is absolutely necessary. We need to hear from you. And I'm very grateful for your courage and your scholarship in coming here today and speaking up. And I also want to just echo what you said. Some of you said that learning is an inherently uncomfortable enterprise. And if we are comfortable, we're not doing our jobs as students, as teachers, or as human beings. Thank you. I am a no today.
Chair Huff?
Yes. Senate Bill 138 passes with expression of opinion that the same should pass. Thank you, Chair Wise. If you would please come back to the table. And I want to reiterate to the audience, since I have held this gavel, I have said that we'll maintain a certain decorum and respect for one another on both sides of the testimony table, and I expect that to happen. We're trying to have as many comments as we can with the limited time, but these individuals that work beside me, they have other places that they have to be, so we're trying our best to accommodate all. I would appreciate it if you would be understanding, and I'm trying to do my best to allow students to speak at least on one bill that they're here to sign up for. So you may proceed. Thank you. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Max Wise, State Senator, District 16. I'm not Senator Brandon Storm for Senate Bill 163. I'm just filling in for his absence.
Ed Massey, District 66, Boone County. I have the committee sub and am here to explain that if questions arise.
Kate Shank, Senior Vice President, Public Affairs for the Kentucky Chamber, here in support as well as to answer any questions.
We have a motion on the sub by Representative McCoy. Do I have a second? Second by Representative Timoney. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Committee sub is adopted. Proceed.
Madam Chair, what you have before you is Senate Bill 163, an act relating to financial aid. The bill sponsor is Senator Brandon Storm. Unfortunately, like I said, he could not be here. I'm going to turn it over to my guest to my right to have some further explanation that worked on this bill with the senator and any questions that may come our way. Thank you.
Thank you. Erin Clare, Vice President of Government Relations for Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority and Student Loan Corporation. This is an omnibus student financial aid bill. It contains, there you go.
We have a motion on the bill by Representative Riley, a second by Representative McCoy. See no further questions. Oh, sorry. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I just wanted to know what the difference was from the original bill and the sub.
I can answer that, Representative. So there was a floor amendment that became part of this bill that cut out a group of persons that could benefit under this bill, largely people that had a felony conviction or were incarcerated. In looking at it in alignment with other bills that we're doing this session, specifically Senate Bill 90, which will be heard in Judiciary on Wednesday, in the interest of restorative justice and trying to give people ample opportunities to recover from their indiscretions, we felt that the floor amendment, which would cut people out of the opportunity to engage, utilize these KEYS funds, would not be appropriate. It would be inconsistent with other legislation that was passing in the interest of that restorative justice. So this corrected that that was brought through the floor amendment, and I've worked with the sponsor as well as the presenters here today to make sure that those people are also afforded that ample opportunity.
Representative Tipton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank you for the legislation, including the part about the not being a convicted felon for the KEYS award. I've been working on that legislation for a while. Representative Timoney filed that bill last year. My question specifically to the proprietary school edition being eligible for KEYS, do we know what kind of financial impact that will have on the KEYS awards and our KEYS funds?
I do. So now that the language has it as a reimbursement process, we anticipated that that would be about a $100,000 increase to the KEYS expenditures annually. However, that was then narrowed a little bit further to be the top 5 workforce needed areas in Kentucky. So that will be less than that.
See no further questions. Mariah, please call the roll.
Representative Baker?
Yes.
Representative Banta?
Yes.
Representative Bojanowski?
Yes.
Representative Decker?
Yes.
Representative Donahue?
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Dossett?
Yes.
Representative Hart?
Yes.
Representative Lewis?
Yes.
Representative Massey?
Yes.
Representative McCool?
Yes.
Representative McCoy?
Yes.
Representative Miller? Representative Gibbons-Prunty?
Yes.
Representative Rayburn?
Yes.
Representative Riley?
Yes.
Representative Scott?
Yes.
Representative Timoney?
Yes.
Representative Tipton?
Yes.
Representative Weber?
Yes.
Representative Wilner?
Thank you for restoring the bill to its original intent, and yes.
Chair Huff?
Yes. Senate Bill 163 passes with the expression of opinion that the same should pass with the committee sub attached thereto. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you.
Next, will we hear Senate Bill 1. The sponsor would please come to the table if you have any guests with you as well. Please introduce yourself for the record, and then we will take action on the sub.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is John Schickel. I serve in the Senate. Thank you for hearing Senate Bill 1. Senate Bill 1 has been about 7 years in the making. It's been heard in interim probably 4 or 5 times. There are 2 basic things to Senate Bill 1, and then I'll let others explain the committee sub. What Senate Bill 1 does, Madam Chair and members of the committee, it empowers our school boards through our superintendents and lets those people who are elected by the entire public make the decision on principal selection and curriculum. That is the basis of the bill.
I'm Ed Massey, District 66 representative from Boone County. I'm also carrying Senate Bill 1 on the floor, and I also am responsible for the committee sub, which has 3 major components. The first component is that in Jefferson County, some things have been going very well on changes that have been made in prior legislation about how they select their principals, how they run their day-to-day operations, how they deal with their curriculum, et cetera. So this sub incorporates that language into this bill to keep them in progress. If something's not broke, you don't need to fix it. And so that's the idea of that portion of the committee sub. And I believe that begins on page 31 and continues through page 34. The second part of this bill, you've kind of just already heard. Senate Bill 138 and the language therein has been rolled into this sub as part of Senate Bill 1. And so that language is in here. We've just had the discussion on that. So without belaboring that issue any further, I'll go to the last provision. And that piece actually begins on page 34 and goes through, I believe, page 36 or 7. And then the last provision basically is an addition that deals with some issues that arose during the COVID-19 scenario. That's under Section 6, and it allows, it defines the days that can be utilized and how the pay should be structured based on some inconsistencies that occurred for people that were absent versus people that were quarantined, et cetera. And so that language was put in there as an ability to clarify that particular piece, and that's in Section 6 on page 38 and 39.
Representative Bojanowski. Okay, thank you. Let's take it. Okay, go ahead.
So, just to clarify on the sub, it does have a lot of discussion about what the JCPS board can and can't do. Could you explain why we are taking away local control of Jefferson County Board of Education to meet more than once every 2 months or so?
As regards to the particular nuances regarding that language, I cannot speak to that. What I can tell you, Representative, is that this was brought to me by folks from Jefferson County that said the process we have in place is working effectively, and therefore we would like to see that continue and not alter that through this new language that's part of Senate Bill 1. In other words, before Senate Bill 1, as Senator Schickel indicated, in fact, I've testified on this bill before I was a legislator. And so before Senate Bill 1 has come to the table here today for adoption or non-adoption, the fact of the matter is Jefferson County had taken the matter into their own hands, if you will, and had done something that they believe is working effectively for them. And so they want to keep that in place, and that is why it's put forth in this sub.
Thank you.
Representative Wilner.
Thank you. And my question is similar. I'm curious who from Jefferson County, was it the Jefferson County School Board that brought this specifically? They're saying that they want less authority over their own, what they've been elected to do. And I see Eric Kennedy at the table, and I would love to hear KSBA's perspective on this.
Yes, ma'am. I'm Eric Kennedy, the Director of Advocacy for the Kentucky School Boards Association, and thank you. Of course, we know you are a former member of that Jefferson County School Board. KSBA that is not a part of the bill that we really have had a lot of involvement with, to be honest. We support and have for many years support most of what you see in Senate Bill 1 as it passed the Senate. So I can't speak in detail to the background on that piece of the committee sub that you see. However, I will say very generally, KSBA for many years has advocated that we need to protect local decision-making with the local elected school board for the things that are in their statutory role as part of our common school system governance. And above all, when there are, as we've seen throughout the pandemic, especially at a heightened level, whenever there are community concerns about things that they like or do not like in a local district, with our districts being so different across the state, we always urge people to reach out and be involved with their board and to run for school board. Right now on our website, we have updated, as we have for at least 30 years, a guide for all of the information for people in the community to run for their school board, and we encourage everyone to look at that. This is an election year. Roughly half of every board and half of all board seats in Kentucky are up this November. So that is, to the extent KSBA has a statement on the background of that piece, that's it.
Quick follow-up with Rep. Massey. So where in Jefferson County, if it didn't come from KSBA, I doubt it came from the school board, where in Jefferson County did this originate?
Well, I actually have talked with several people. In fact, I believe there's also been a floor amendment filed that would also address this particular piece. I believe that was going to be carried by Representative Nemes. But there have been several people affiliated with Jefferson County that have come and spoke to me on this regards. And basically, I'm not trying to portray that I know the inner workings of Jefferson County. I served on a board for 22 years, but it was substantially smaller than Jefferson County. We had about 23,000 compared to their, high enrollment. And so it was brought as an issue that initially there was one committee sub, and then as the carrier of the committee sub and as the person that will carry Senate Bill 1 on the floor, I was asked that it was brought to the chair, it was brought to me, and said it was being rolled into this one committee sub. That's why you see a large committee sub that incorporates not only the Jefferson County piece, but 138 and the piece about the COVID-19. So it was several members. It's not that I'm not at liberty to tell. Some of them were, I think, officials that were everything from lobbyists to members to people in the community. So I will be glad to share those names with you privately. I don't know that I want to try to forget somebody doing it here publicly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take action on the sub since we. Representative Scott, please be brief.
I will always, Chairwoman. Thank you. My only question is, why is Senate Bill 138 rolled into this bill?
Again, as the person that's carrying the sub, I was told that 138 was going to be rolled into that. I'm not even sure necessarily the origin of that. It was heard already today. It's heard here. I presume, and again, that's a dangerous place to be, and I understand that if for any reason Senate Bill 1 didn't pass, they still wanted the pieces of 138. But if Senate Bill 1 does pass, I'm not sure there's a need to call 138 on the floor, and that was the strategy that was brought and put into this particular sub.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you. Let's take action on the sub. We already have the motion and the second, please. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Committee sub is adopted. Proceed. Do you have anything else to add?
Not unless there's answers to questions. With regards to the sub, now I will say that I have worked with Senator Schickel now for, like I said, the last 5 or 6 years. Myself and my former superintendent, Dr. Randy Poe, have worked on this largely because there's been a lot of conflicts. I think the intention of site-based councils was very well intended. This is not to take out parental involvement. That is not the goal at all. In fact, if you know the makeup of the councils, to some degree, the parental involvement's been at a disadvantage just based on the numbers make up a site-based council. But there's been conflicts, and one of the big conflicts has come with selection of principals, and the other conflict has been curriculum, because if you have several schools that are feeding a middle school, and then maybe 2 or 3 middle schools feeding a high school, and you have curriculums that are all over the board, it's really hard to get those corralled so that you can provide a good delivery package to the students. And what happens is a lot of teachers spend their time trying to bring that alignment into place and losing valuable instruction time. Finally, there's been some conflicts with regards to application of the principals. I was party to the board that was the first board sued for usurping the authority of site-based councils. It was Boucher versus the Boone County Board of Education. And so that's been a hands-off approach for a long time. But seeing those conflicts and trying to work out a better solution, we believe that this is the best way to go, and that's why it's been vetted for so many years.
One additional point, Madam Chair, is that I receive a lot of complaints, and I know other people do, is parents need to have a say, but, we hear from grandparents, we hear from aunts and uncles, we hear from a lot of folks, and this bill includes everyone in that voice.
Thank you. We do have some to speak against the bill. If we could have Lauren Mitchell come to the table and introduce yourself for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
There we go. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I live in Woodford County. My husband and I farm there, and we have 2 sons in the public schools there. Thank you for having me and allowing me to speak today. I'd like to start by reading a quote from the Kentucky Family and School Partnership Guide put together by the Pritchard Committee. The best indicator of student success is the extent to which families encourage learning at home and involve themselves in their child's education. I firmly believe this. I act this out every day. One vital way for families to stay involved and have a seat at the table in Kentucky public schools is through school-based decision-making councils, SBDM. I have served on councils for 10 years now. Through SBDM, parents have the opportunity to make decisions for individual schools at the local level. Who knows best what a school needs than the principal, teachers, and parents of that particular school? Senate Bill 1 does diminish parent voice. You are talking about giving the decision-making to 6 people versus the people that are in each school. My council has 8 on it. There are several schools in our district, all of which have its own council that are all making local decisions for each of those schools. They know best for what those kids need. The 6 people that are responsible for the school board, I'm not saying they're not qualified to make those decisions, but they're not in the schools every day. Senate Bill 1 diminishes family engagement. I urge you, please vote no for this bill. Keep SBDM councils the way they are. Keep parent voice. Keep school decisions in the hands of those who know the school best, the parents, the teachers, the principals, and the students of those schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Eddie Campbell, KEA. Please introduce yourself for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Eddie Campbell. I'm a Midland High School music teacher from Knox County, currently serving as president of the Kentucky Education Association. I can't comment on the committee sub since it was just adopted and it's not been available for the public to read or comment on. I will say that site-based decision-making councils were a cornerstone of the Kentucky Education Reform Act over 30 years ago, and the purpose is reflected in its name. And the crafters of CARA believe that some decisions are best made by local constituents, parents, and educators to ensure that the needs of the students are met. For more than 30 years, our SBDM councils have been an essential driver in Kentucky student success, opportunity, and growth. According to KDE, there are 7,625 Kentucky citizens that are serving on these councils. That group is made up of parents who are elected by their peers, teachers who are elected by their colleagues, and a principal who is selected on the recommendation of the council and in collaboration with the superintendent, who has a vote on those councils. SBDM members know and understand the unique student populations in their schools that they represent. They understand the issues and challenges that the students face as a group and are best qualified to adopt policies to facilitate academic success, neutralizing the parent and educator elected representatives and centralizing that authority of principal selection and curriculum decisions in the superintendent is a step backwards in Kentucky education. I do urge you to vote no on this bill, and I'm just trying to keep my comments brief, and thank you for allowing us to speak today.
Thank you. I think that Justice League spoke on their first bill and left. With that, and seeing no further questions, we have a motion on the bill by Representative McCoy, a second by... Ladies, I'm going to ask that you get with the sponsor after, please. We're 9:30 now, and you had the opportunity to already ask. I apologize, but I am really short on time. We need a second. Second by Representative Baker. Mariah, please call the roll.
Representative Baker?
Yes.
Representative Banta?
Yes.
Representative Bojanowski?
I'd like to explain my no vote, please.
Proceed.
Just as a clarification, the question I asked was related to the principal selection in JCPS in the sub. But there's another section of this bill that is 2 and a bit pages that is explicitly directing JCPS's Board of Education on things like how many times they can meet. So I just wanted to clarify that I support the amendment that was added in for principal selection for JCPS, but there's no clarification as to why we have this other section. Thank you.
Representative Decker?
Yes.
Representative Donahue?
Madam Chair, may I explain my vote?
Yes.
A couple quick comments. You know, I noticed on the committee sub it was put, I found it very interesting that we asked who was and behind this sub, and no one didn't feel comfortable or at liberty to name those names. And I've always supported my local councils and local committees, and always will. And it's interesting, sometimes, I may add quickly, is that people that, like superintendents that came up through the system and got their jobs coming through site-based councils and stuff, want to change that. I find that kind of interesting. So I'm a no vote today. Thank you.
Representative Dossett?
Yes.
Representative Hart?
Yes.
Representative Lewis?
Briefly explain my vote.
Briefly.
Thank you. It's a tough bill for me, and I'm superintendent, former school superintendent, 13 years. But I always remember where these complaints ended up, and they were always with me. And sometimes my hands were tied where I couldn't do what I thought needed to be done. But this doesn't do away with site-based councils. The districts that use these well, I think, will continue to do so. I think this is just a way that if there is an issue, that the superintendent could step in and maybe correct it and move forward. But I'm a yes vote. Thank you.
Representative Massey?
Yes, briefly explain my vote, very briefly.
Proceed.
Just understand that, again, to echo the comments of Representative Lewis, we want parent involvement. Schools that are successful, my experience has been in 30 years of education, parent involvement makes the difference between a successful school and an unsuccessful school. With regards to a lot of the committee sub things, those things obviously happen, and obviously late in session, people are trying to get their pieces heard, and so we'll certainly continue to hear from the parties involved here. I'll be glad to talk with people that have had questions following the meeting. Thank you. My vote is a yes.
Representative McCool?
No.
Representative McCoy?
Yes.
Representative Miller? Representative Gibbons-Prunty?
Yes.
Representative Rayburn?
Yes.
Representative Riley?
May I explain my vote briefly?
Yeah, briefly.
I don't think it's fair to Senator Schickel or Senator Wise for these two bills to be rolled together. These two bills are too important to the state to be voted on together. I think they need to be voted on separately. And for that reason, I'm going to pass right now.
Representative Scott?
No.
Representative Timoney?
Briefly explain my vote.
Briefly.
My concerns rest with the consultation aspect. I would like to see that piece of consultation with the schools to be enumerated. I would like to see, parents and teachers on a committee. I agree with this bill with the piece about the district curriculum decisions. Like Representative Massey had said, both academic and student support curriculums. I think that there is an argument. Whenever I talk about education, I always think about the students that are most challenged, and those are the ones who are most transient. And I worked with lots of students who would come from one school to another. The disconnect academically from curriculum to curriculum, we need to remedy that, as well as the student support curriculums from school to school are different. We need to universalize that. So I was 100% support behind that, but with the addition of 138, I have to be a no. Thank you.
Representative Tipton?
Yes.
Representative Weber?
Yes.
Representative Wilner?
Yes, briefly explain. I'm sorry. That's a no. Briefly explain.
Okay.
I received a message from Rep. Nemes who asked me to please clarify for the committee that he did not file an amendment having to do with the board piece of it, that it has to do with preserving what JCPS is already doing. And he asked that I clarify that. And I think that's really symptomatic of how rushed this process has been. We're all scrambling to absorb what's in the sub. Even Rep. Massey, who I have great respect for, is scrambling to know what's in the sub and where it came from. So even if I were not already opposed to the content of this bill, which I am, the process alone would make it a no for me.
Chair Huff?
Yes. This bill has a title amendment. We need a motion on the... We have a motion on the title amendment by Representative Tipton, a second by Representative McCoy. All in favor? All opposed?
No.
Title amendment is adopted. Senate Bill 1 passes with expression of the opinion that the same should pass with the committee substitute and the amendment attached thereto. Thank you. Representative McCoy is ready. If you would please introduce yourself for the record and please proceed.
Good morning. I'm Chad McCoy, State Representative, 50th District. I'm here on House Bill 9. I just want to start briefly. Charter schools are not new. They're not new to the United States. They're not new to Kentucky. In fact, I think all but about seven states have them. And you've got to pay attention to the word charter, because charter means contract. They are schools that are created by contract with local school boards. And interestingly, they have quite a bit of a track record. Some of it's bad, some of it's good. I'm not here to tell anybody that they are the panacea. But we have seen during the COVID pandemic just an absolute outcry from parents for something different. And I want to remind everybody, this bill started back in December. My caucus, we discussed this. And since that time, I've met with just about everybody who's for it or against it, and we've made a lot of changes. And some of the folks that I met with were from the Pritchard Committee. And I don't know if you got to see what they put out last week, but I want to read you just a paragraph. When analyzing the research on charter school effectiveness, the Center for Research on Student Outcomes, CREDO, at Stanford University is still the gold standard. Their research shows clear evidence to support charter schools as a tool in closing achievement gaps for historically marginalized students, particularly in urban areas. CREDO found that typical student in an urban charter school receives an equivalent of 40 additional days of learning growth in math and 28 additional growth in reading. Similarly, the Thomas B. Fordham Institute came out with a charter school paper in January. And the important thing, the takeaways, you can go to the takeaways section. Number one, there are three. In general, the growth of charter schools benefits low-income Black and Hispanic students academically. More attention should be paid to charter schools' impressive results with Hispanic students. Charter schools have the potential to significantly reduce America's racial and socioeconomic achievement gaps. And so it's in that vein that a long time ago, 2017, this body passed charter schools. We've already done that. They're here. They're in every district. They're authorized in every district in our state. We funded them before, but we did it poorly. We funded them in the budget. And there's about a 5-year horizon on a charter school. And so funding them in the budget, which is a 2-year document, doesn't allow them to exist and continue to exist. So the committee sub in front of you, which we'll need to take action on so that we can have it in front of us.
Yes. We have a motion on the sub by Representative Tipton, a second by Representative Rayburn. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Committee sub is adopted.
The committee sub in front of you takes a lot of comments from everybody, and here's what it does. It does three things. Number one, under current law, the only authorizers allowed in this state are local school boards. That doesn't change. Under current law, if local school board denies an authorizer, the appeal is to the KDE. That doesn't change. The only changes with respect to the authorizer part are that an applicant can ask the KDE for technical assistance on the application. In addition, if the KDE is going to either approve or deny an application on appeal, we've required them to set out the reasons why with respect to the community standards and whether or not this is good or bad for that local community. But in addition, because for school districts that are smaller, we want to make sure that the KDE can't force a charter school on them, because that can cause problems financially. You know, if you've got a small school district, if you're 5,500 kids and the KDE forces you to have a charter school, then that's going to impact your ability to have revenues and everything. So what we put in this bill was if you're a school district below 7,500 kids, then as a part of the application to the local school board, the applicant must have a memorandum of understanding with that school board. If they don't have it, the application is deemed incomplete. And what that does, to just boil that down, is it gives local school boards, which again, who are the only authorizers in this bill, it gives the ones in school districts below 7,500 an absolute veto power. If they don't want a charter school, they're never going to have a charter school, period. Second thing this bill does is it puts in place statutorily the funding model. The same one we already passed in a budget years ago, the same one that's in House Bill 563 from last year. It just clarifies that the SEEK money follows the kid. That's all it does. So really, no real changes to the existing law until you get to Part 3 of the bill. And Part 3 is, as I listened to everybody who came and talked to me, and Representative Bojanowski came and talked to me a couple times. I had the superintendents come talk to me more than a couple times. Everybody kept saying, well, why can't we just do a pilot project? Why can't we just do this? Why can't? I said, fine, let's do it. So we're going to do a pilot project. And the way we've drafted this is 2 different pilot projects, one in northern Kentucky, and one will be ultimately in Louisville, is where it would end up. And on the northern Kentucky one, just so everybody understands, we said that the authorizer only for the pilot project, not on an ongoing basis, could be Northern Kentucky University. And actually in one draft, I had it that it would be Northern Kentucky University. But we worked with Carmen, their government relations lady, and she asked that we make it permissive, and that's what we did. That's the change in the committee sub you see here. So this is the same bill that's been out in the public for more than a week now. The only change in the committee sub today has to do with that Northern Kentucky part. Madam Chairwoman, I think that covers the highlights of the bill. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Representative Bojanowski, and let's please be brief as possible. I have some people that are here to speak against this measure as well, so I want to give as many an opportunity, and it is about 8:10 till.
Yes, so thank you, and I appreciate your time speaking with me. You just stated something that I believe is not how I'm interpreting the bill. You said the only funding is that SEEK money follows the kid.
Yes,
and I don't read that in the bill. In the bill, I read that every federal, state, and locally raised dollar is to be proportionately appropriated to a charter school. So that would mean, if I understand it correctly, that if Nelson County Schools opened a charter school and students from Bardstown Independent went to the charter school, the local funds raised by Nelson County would be proportionately appropriated to students from other districts. So, I mean, could you correct that? It is not simply SEEK money that follows the child. It is every dollar, with the exception of, I believe, nickels and something about building facilities. Every dollar follows the child.
So that's not true. What the bill actually says is that the charter schools will be eligible for all federal funding, just like any other school in the district. And remember, they are public schools in the district approved by the local school board. And if you read the bill, the funding is one of the things that can be chartered. That is, negotiated back and forth. What the bill says, though, is that the SEEK formula, that student will be included in the ADA, and their portion of the SEEK will follow them. Now, your question assumed something different, and that was an interdistrict transfer, because you said a Bardstown Independent child who's in a different school district now going to a Nelson County charter school. So under your hypothetical, we now have to go back and look at House Bill 563 from last year and see what the interdistrict transfer policies are between those two school districts, because that will govern, because that's what governs all public schools. These are no different. And don't ever forget, if the local school board does not want it to work that way, then they just don't enter into the charter.
If I could respond briefly?
Yes.
Okay, so charter schools, in their charter, they establish their own resides, correct?
Honestly, I'm not sure I understand that question.
Yes, the charter school does.
Show me what you're reading.
I just remember it, but I could look it up.
I just don't know what you mean by they establish their own resides.
So there is language in the bill that says that the charter school can set up their own resident and non-resident students. It's not based upon the district where they are.
You'll have to show me that.
I will pull that up. Okay, I will certainly pull that up. Thank you.
Representative McCool?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question. Representative, you've already mentioned, I think, but I just want to clarify the charter schools this is not a charter school engagement or startup. This charter school has already been started since 2017. So can currently KDE direct the public charter schools to any of our counties according to the law?
Yes, sir. Representative McCool, right now under the law, anyone could apply to one of our local school districts to start a charter school. And then if the local school board denied that application, that applicant has the right now under current law, to appeal to the KDE. Under the way the law exists right now, the KDE would look at that and they might mandate and direct the local school board to accept that charter application. That's why it was important to put that 7,500 school district, I call it the super veto, in there so that those local schools don't have to take it. And the way we did it, again, is that made it a part of the application, so the application is deemed not complete. So it's not even something you can really appeal from.
Thank you. Madam Chair, could I ask one more quick question, please?
Quickly, please.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for that reply. If a charter school student who needed special needs, visual impairment or speech therapy, and they are a student at the charter school, who's responsible for that child? Is it the charter school or is the county school?
Great question, because this is one where I think we get a lot of confusion and fear, quite frankly. You know, one of the arguments you always hear is, oh, we're going to take dollars from local schools, and that the smart kids will all end up at this school, and all the kids that have issues will end up at another, and it's unfair. That's actually what happens currently under magnet schools, and that is not what happens under a charter school. A charter school has to take all comers. So kids with special needs, kids on an IEP, anything, the charter school takes them and is responsible for them. It's covered under that charter.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Lewis?
I have 3 questions, Madam Chair. I'll do them one at a time. Representative, page 5 of 80, maybe just some clarification on line 19. It says, beginning in academic year 2022-23, any authorizer may authorize an unlimited number of public charter schools. So what would be the interpretation on that?
Representative Lewis, that's existing language, and I think that's just cleanup to make the years match the current law.
Okay. On page 14 of 80, 12-2. I think that's right. 12E. Or 7D, I think. 14 of 80. If a public charter school does not offer any interscholastic athletic activity sanctioned by the board, then those kids, a student enrolled in a public charter school, shall be eligible to participate at the school the student would attend based on the student's residence. So,
yeah, Representative Lewis, that's existing language. I didn't change any of that. That came from the original bill. And I think the way that it worked is if the charter school offered a particular sport, the child would play the sport at the charter school. But if it didn't, the district could allow them to play at another school. But Representative Lewis, that's going to be something that's part of the charter, if you will. When the local school board actually authorizes this, they'll have that worked out. And don't forget, I always mess this one up. The High School Athletic Association's rules will govern all of this. So there's, any recruiting issues, I always hear that one a lot. No, there's no difference here between this and any other public school.
No, it says they're eligible. And then one last question, if you'll indulge me.
Yes, sir.
If Northern Kentucky is not the authorizer, then who becomes the authorizer?
I think this is back on like page 41. Bear with me here. And it's actually, sorry, it's on page 43, and it's paragraph 4A, B, C, And essentially what you're going to get is a collective. So members of the local school boards that want to come together. So Northern Kentucky's a weird animal. They've got a lot of independent school districts nestled within larger school districts that are countywide. So some of those school boards, members from each of those school boards could come together, create a collective school board that will then be the authorizer if NKU chooses not to do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's so much, I just have some comments. I have questions on the funding, transportation, administrative cost, and who will bear it. Athletics, as questions already been asked. Lack of local control, teachers, and I believe I've read where 1 in 4 charter schools fail by 5 years, and there's so much fraud and mismanagement in them that I really wonder how much good they really are. We have some that we can point out that are doing a good job, but where you have 1 in 4 or in 5 years, that's a lot. So I just have a big concern about charter schools to begin with. We always think about Jefferson County. You know, there's other places in the state besides Jefferson County. Seems like everyone really wants to think about Jefferson County. We have many programs in Jefferson County. We have many schools in Jefferson County. Right now, we're trying to rearrange a lot of our busing and schools, home schools. So I just don't want to ask questions. I have many questions, and I know we don't have much time. So, Madam Chair, I'm not going to take a lot of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Representative, I know you can't see. Oh, there we go. I just wanted to know why Northern Kentucky and Louisville as the 2 locations that you decided for this pilot.
Representative, over the last year or so, and actually this really predates me, and I'm sorry they're not here. There's a group of ministers in the west end of Louisville that I think for about 20 years have been begging for charter schools in that part of Louisville. They think the community there supports it. They've got, and these things got to have community support. You don't put a charter school where they're not wanted, you know. So there's a group of folks that want to come and do one, and we think that if we can go in there, and I'll tell you this, Representative, every single person who came to talk to me, whether they were for or against charter schools, acknowledged this one truth. We are failing the minority kids in the west end of Louisville when it comes to education, period. So my hope is if we run a pilot project, maybe we can get one there that will show the rest of the state there's nothing to be afraid of. These things are going on all over the country, and they're not going to hurt public schools. 90% of the kids still go to public schools, or traditional public schools. These are, of course, still public. So I think west end of Louisville definitely needs one. Northern Kentucky, especially up near the riverfront, Covington, is another area where we see, I don't want to call it an education desert, but that's what I think it is. And so there's an opportunity there to go ahead and see if we can try, if you'll see in my bill, we called it an urban academy, where local kids right then and there, the people that live in the community that want this, maybe we can come together and give it a shot. So that's why we chose those 2.
Please be brief.
Yes, I will. I'm curious to know, because there are 3 representatives who serve the West End, have you had a chance to meet with any of my other 2 colleagues about this bill who serve the West End?
No, ma'am, I didn't, to be honest. But in fairness, they didn't come see me either. It's not been a secret. It's been out there for a long time. But I think we've had other committees, especially when the original charter school bill was here. I think you and I came in together. You might remember some of those discussions. You know, we had a ton of folks from the West End. And frankly, I didn't have them here today because I knew we weren't going to have time to hear it all.
All right, thank you.
Representative Timoney.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Representative, I'm going to start with a compliment. Thank you for removing the all virtual option. All virtual option should not ever be a charter option anywhere. That's 9 times out of 10 when you see charters in the news, it's because of abuses in virtual options. So thank you for doing that. Very first, I do believe that we are. I know that the trend nationwide has been, you know, the choice and the charter piece, and I completely understand that. There's some areas, particularly in parts of the state and parts of the country that need people thinking outside the box. I have a lot of history with working with choice programs, with charter. My concern is that we may slightly be overselling the effectiveness of charter. John Hattie is my go-to person, New Zealand researcher. He's got roughly 80 million students that he studied, thousands of studies on different things, and he ranks. He's got a rank list of 252 influences or effects on education. And he's got things in there, response to intervention for students with learning needs, and he's got them on a rank order. And if you go all the way to the bottom, he says that the standard deviation, 0.12, would be a student just sitting there existing in nature. And he's got charter at 0.09 as far as effectiveness. And choice is just slightly ahead of that at 0.11. So my concern is that we are going to, again, come to the education table and upset the apple cart, get a lot of teachers upset about a lot of things for something where statistically there's not really a huge upside, okay? And I'll close with a question. My concern is about schools that will close, okay? Charter schools close all across the country. You can Google it right now. I think last month there were 14, several of them in Indiana. What provisions are in this bill to protect those kids that now have to leave a charter school that they were sold is going to be your gift to the promised land, and now they have to go back to their school? Because if you refer back to John Hattie's list, you have moving between schools has a negative 0.34 impact on student achievement. So we're creating a system where we potentially could really harm students, and that's going to be my concern. What provisions put in place to protect that?
So remember, they're in the district right now going to a public school. The district is the one that's going to authorize this school. The district is the one that's going to oversee this school. And if something is going wrong with that school and that school closes, those kids are right in their same district they ever were. I don't know specifically where it is in the bill, but they'll just end up back at their other schools. Real quick, I want to comment on something you said earlier. In addition to Stanford maybe disagreeing with your Kiwi guy, I participated in a book club with my school superintendent and a bunch of teachers over COVID. And we did it in Zoom because we couldn't do it. And it was great. It was eye-opening. The teachers were awesome. They had lots of great ideas. And we did a study of all these different school districts all across the country. And I kept my mouth shut, and because at the end, everything that the teachers pointed to and said, that's awesome. I wish we could do that. I wish we could do that. I wish we could do that. I went and looked up the schools, and they were all charter schools. I'm not here to tell you they will fix every problem. There are good ones and there are bad ones. But to say that we're not even going to try, to me, we're doing a disservice to kids. And the research is especially kids who are minorities that live in cities.
Representative Wilner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When charters were approved in 2017, I was on the Jefferson County Board of Education at that time, and we immediately began training for board members on what it means to authorize a charter. We studied various standards that were in place. The school district even hired a person to help, an attorney, to help us understand charter law and charter languages. charter language, what makes an effective charter, what makes a problematic charter, and we got very, very good training. We were, recognized that all eyes were on Jefferson County. We were even ahead of the curve on Kentucky School Board Association in offering training on this topic. And we looked very closely at standards that needed to be in place for a charter to be approvable and to offer some protections. What standards are in this bill to make sure, and I should add, by the way, that no charter applications have been submitted to Jefferson County Public Schools, as far as I know, within the appropriate time frame for review. But what are the protections that are in here, and would Jefferson County School Board be called upon to approve a charter where standards are not met?
So keep in mind, the standards that were adopted in 2017, Representative Carney at the time was the guy spearheading this. He was a public school teacher. It was critically important to him that we get it right. We can all cite bad examples, just even north up in Ohio, of charters that don't do it right. So this bill has a ton of guardrails, and candidly, it's almost 80 pages of them. But I want to be very clear, Representative Wilner, I'm not changing any of them. So all of them are still here. It's existing law from 2017. I can't cite you to all of them, but you and I can get together and read, here's what an applicant has to do, and it's just a boom, 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 boom kind of thing. But we have not changed that in this bill.
Quick follow-up. In our training, we were made aware that the safeguards in the bill, the 2017 bill, were not necessarily sufficient, that they were a good starting point, but that we as a board were advised, with legal opinion, to adopt stricter standards so that we don't see the kinds of, the terrible things that have happened across the country with charter schools and with students who've been promised the moon and then are really left out in the cold. So would it be possible to amend this bill with stricter standards, or to allow the school board to adopt stricter standards to be able to stick with those, or would they be compelled to approve a charter that didn't meet stricter standards than what's in the bill?
With all due respect, ma'am, this law has been in place since 2017, and I haven't seen that bill. So I'm curious as to why, if it needed to be changed, nobody's bothered to even bring it up. I will say this, though. The implementation of the pilot project does not even really kick in until July of next year. There's a whole other session between now and then, and I think lots of folks in this space would be wide open to conversations about what, if anything, needs to be changed.
Thank you.
We do have some people that wish to speak. We're going to take it into 10:15, and so I ask you to be brief. Jillian Tackett, the commissioner, KHSAA, if you would come to the table, please. You have about 3 minutes.
I'm Julian Tackett with the High School Athletic Association, and our objections actually to the bill, I think you all need to make the education policy decisions. People ahead of me and behind me know a lot more about curriculum and school options. The athletics piece that's contained on page 14 and 15 is troubling, and has been more troubling to the membership of the schools as they've shared with me over the last 4 years. So I do look forward to an opportunity to speak with a sponsor, and we'll relish that opportunity to try to share some information.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I comment?
Briefly, we're in the current.
But Mr. Tackett, I'm curious. I haven't changed any part of that bill. And back in 2017, you were quoted in the Lexington Herald Leader as saying, for us, it's just another type of school. We already have 6 different types of school because of the various types of non-publics. Your message to families and students, don't let athletics be the reason you go or don't go to a charter school. Nothing in my bill has changed what you were okay with in 2017.
We had the same conversation with Representative Carney when that misquote occurred in the paper. We know it is a different type of school. There is specifically down in there sections about going to one school and being enrolled at another. That's the problem.
And since 2017, have you offered any language to change that?
We unfortunately, but prior to Mr. Carney's illness, we did have that discussion. It has not had anything followed. No, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The members of CASA, Please come to the table, introduce yourself for the record, and you have about 3 minutes. I was challenged with a robust agenda, and we're doing the best we can to allow everyone to, or at least 4 or 5 in each group. So please share your concerns. Introduce yourself for the record. You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Henry Webb, Superintendent of Kenton County Schools. Thank you for allowing us a few minutes to speak on House Bill 9 this morning. I'm here to oppose House Bill 9 and ask that this committee oppose House Bill 9. I could speak for a long time on this bill, but I know we were very brief. Just a couple of points real quick. To Representative McCoy, I don't know Representative McCoy, but I obviously respect all of our legislators. But to pass policy and say we'll figure it out is pretty bad policy when we're considering public education in the state of Kentucky. I'm very passionate about public education, and I asked this committee to not roll the dice and say we'll figure it out. Let's just do it. Just a couple of things about Northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky is a unique place, but I want this committee to understand we have over 150 school options, public and private, over 150. And now with the new open borders, my question to the committee is, why do we need additional language on charter schools? We have open borders. It's already in the law. We have elected officials that can make the decision. So what is this really about? We have over 150 choices. And just real quick, I would just say that Senator Wise spoke earlier, and he said he has faith in our commissioner. Our commissioner, I didn't tell him I was going to quote him. I think he's in the room. But yesterday in a Monday message, I would submit to you he probably has as much experience with as anybody in this room on charter schools, being from Colorado. And he stated, this is poor policy. It's a poor bill. We need to take more time. If you're going to consider any changes, let's get it right. And let's not just rush and make poor policy, especially in an area where we already have choice. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Julia Pyle. I'm the chair of the Boone County School Board. And also by trade, I'm a former CPA. I'm a treasurer and fiscal officer of a community college in Ohio. And so I have a very conservative financial background. My biggest concern about this bill is around the financial oversight of the charter schools. As a school board member, I levy taxes on our constituents, and I am responsible to them as their representative. In this charter school bill, there is not fiscal oversight. The funds transfer to an organization where they're not represented by taxpayers who elect them. There's not oversight. There's not accountability. What I liken this to, I'm going to give you a metaphor. I have a 15-year-old son, teenage son. I send him into the store saying we need some snacks. He comes out with Doritos and has opened the bag and starts eating them. What he should have bought was carrots and some apples and bananas. And that's what we're going to get with this charter school because there's not oversight on the process with internal controls in place before this happens. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for giving us the opportunity. I'm Dr. Sally Sugg. I'm the superintendent in Shelby County Public Schools. I've been an educator for 40 years. I've been an administrator for 27 at the state and also the local level. I was associate commissioner under 2 of our commissioners, and I worked predominantly with low-performing schools in some of the areas that have been mentioned. We have put millions and millions of dollars of resources into those areas, and I submit to you, you have nothing different that will help the students that you propose will be helped with this legislation. What I submit to you today is the students that spoke today are the best example of what our public education system can do for all students. That is all. Each and every student has an equitable opportunity in all of those opportunities out there, public, private, parochial. We have many options. Public school is producing some of our best and our brightest. I want to also tell you a very brief story. I had a resignation I got through an email last night from a high school teacher effective April 11th. He is not leaving to go to Jefferson County, which pays more. I'm right on the border of Jefferson County, and we fight that all the time. He's leaving education. That's the second resignation I've received this week. Each week, it looks about the same. And all of my fellow superintendents that are here, I think, will attest to that's what we're seeing. They're not leaving for the reasons you would think. Their reasons are the war on education, the war on teachers. And this is another example of them feeling downtrodden and beaten up after 2 years of being a public servant to not only our students, but feeding our families during a worldwide pandemic. I also want to say I served for 4 years as a public school board member elected, and I'm representing Miss Brenda Jackson, who has spent 33 years on our local school board. And I want to reiterate what you just mentioned about the taxes that she is responsible for, that if they walk across the county line into Jefferson County, into a charter school, we will have no control. Those people who elected our school board members have not a clue what this is going to do. My last point, I want to reiterate everything Representative Timoney said about Dr. John Hattie. If you will do your research, and pardon me if I misunderstood, I think you said a TV guy. Dr. John Hattie is one of the most leading educational researchers today and has been for many years. He's one that many, many folks that are a lot smarter than we are rely on. And if you will read that research, I think you will see what charter schools can do for Kentucky.
Terry Morgan, Hardin County Schools.
Please be brief, Ms. Morgan. We're running.
I will. I just want to say, Representative McCoy, what I would like for you all to consider is, yes, charter schools may have to take all students, but do they have to keep all students? And what will that revolving door look like with kids coming in and then that school determining that this isn't the right fit for their particular school, and then they do come back to public schools on every day? And at the end of a 2-year cycle where our teachers have gone above and beyond, this is another attack they feel on the hard work and dedication they have done throughout these past 2 years and over time. So again, thank you, but I ask that you vote no to House Bill 9.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us. And I apologize to anyone else. You're free to talk to the sponsor at any time, and this bill will be heard again in the Senate. But we have really overrun the time today, and I apologize if you did not get to speak. We have a motion on the bill. Motion on the bill by Representative Baker. Second. Second by Representative McCoy. Mariah, please call the roll.
Representative Baker?
Yes.
Representative Banta?
Yes.
Representative Bojanowski?
Explain my vote.
Briefly, Ms. Representative Bojanowski.
I'd like to push back on the statement that Representative McCoy made that the selection of kids is not what happens in charters. I've got an academic book here that details how charters do select their own children, how charter schools control access and shape enrollment. And I have amendments filed that address some of the policy guidance that would improve our charter schools. So I would like to speak with you about those. And I just have to say, to flat out say that we are failing our minority kids in West Louisville without sitting down and collaborating with JCPS, with Dr. Polio, is just so frustrating to me as a JCPS teacher. Thank you.
Would you vote, please?
A no vote.
Representative Decker?
Yes.
Representative Donahue?
May I explain my vote?
Briefly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, what we've done down here as legislators, 2 comments. You know, we have a constitutional obligation to fund common schools, which are public schools, okay? And we do not check all the boxes to make public schools successful. We don't do it. We talk about it, but we don't do it. But the thing about this, the comment was made by my fellow legislator that did someone reach out to him. As a legislator, I've been doing this a long time. When I file legislation, what I do is that if I got legislation that's going to be in front of you, I reach out to both sides to get the input on this. And so I'll reserve the rest of my comments on the House floor, but my vote today is no.
Representative Dossett?
Yes.
Representative Hart?
Yes.
Representative Lewis?
No.
Representative Massey?
Can I explain my vote briefly? Thank you, everyone, for your presentation. I've been in education for 30-plus years now, and I have some major concerns. I think we all, at the end of the day, have the best interest in mind. I think that's the goal. That should be the goal. If it's not the goal, it should be the goal. That being said, when things come to a rush, as this has this year, it makes it difficult to have those open, candid conversations. And I think we do need to have those open, candid conversations and collaborate to see what's best in our communities. If we're going to give local control, then we need to make sure that we reach out to all stakeholders and have that conversation. So with regards to that, my vote today is no.
Representative McCool?
Yes.
Representative McCoy?
Yes.
Representative Miller? Representative Gibbons-Prunty?
Yes.
Representative Rayburn?
Yes.
Representative Riley?
I'll briefly explain my vote. I'm
Go
very
ahead.
concerned about the funding mechanism of this. I've been told by people that are much more experts than I am in school financing that this is probably unconstitutional. And I think there's probably going to be lawsuits filed in that regard. And I really don't want us to go through lawsuits again. The other part of this is Dr. Suggs, I think it was from Shelby County, mentioned. I'm very concerned about the oversight in this. I think it's very important that we have transparency in our schools and we are aware of all the different things that affect our students. So for that reason, I'm a no.
Representative Scott?
No.
Representative Timoney? Representative Tipton?
Yes.
Representative Weber?
Yes.
Representative Wilner?
Briefly explain.
Briefly.
I have, again, much more to say about this, but I do want to comment on this process, that this bill was originally slated for the Appropriations and Revenue Committee. It apparently could not get the votes there. It was withdrawn from committee to get the yes votes here. The committee membership had to be changed with the addition of one member, the removal of another. This is not good process. We were elected to represent our constituents. Some bills are meant to not pass out of committee because they're not ready yet. And for the gamesmanship that has been gone on to get a yes vote and to get this out of committee, this is not good democratic process. This is not good governance. This is not transparency. And I hope that my statement just now made transparent some of the games that have been played on this bill. Thank you.
We need your vote, please.
I vote no.
Chair Huff?
No. We have a title amendment on this bill. I have a motion on title amendment. Motion by Representative McCoy. Second. Second, Representative Baker. All in favor? All opposed?
No.
Title amendment is adopted. House Bill 9 passes with expression of opinion that the same should pass with committee substitute and the title attached thereto. Thank you for your indulgence and joining us today to have a motion for adjournment. We are adjourned.